We did 10 conversations in a row where everyone said this is impossible. And we said, okay, now we're really doing it.
So what sparked the decision to found Radical AI?
Aerospace, defense, energy have a serious need for novel materials, meaning what we call enabling technologies. The customization requirements that are needed for advanced materials to make those things become a reality is immense.
How would you describe the company and the problem that you guys are solving?
We are trying to solve some of the hardest problems in the world. We fail daily. It is excruciatingly challenging to work at Radical AI because what we're trying to do has fundamental impact for the entire human race.
You guys have also collaborated with the White House, OCP, on the 2025 National AI and R&D Strategy. How did that come about and what did you guys contribute?
AI for science must be in that policy. We have to do whatever it takes to do that.
All right, Joseph, coffee, tea, or something else? What
Coffee.
fuels your morning? Yeah,
Coffee.
straight away.
Right away.
One, two, or just...
So I've been working on getting it lower than 2.
Okay.
But frequently I'm up super early, so I'll have one on my way to work, and then after my morning session workout or early morning work session, we'll have to have a second one. But I try to keep them before noon so it doesn't mess up my sleep at the back end. That's like my objective. A lot of days I find myself at the machine at 1 p.m., but that's the goal today. So two a day.
Got it. Good. All right. When you were a kid, what did you think you'd grow up to be?
I had the stereotypical dream of an astronaut, some type of nerdy scientist who would travel space. Might still become true one day, by the way. So I'm not giving up on that dream yet. But kind of always knew I would be in that realm. And then when I got a little bit older, out of like a very young kid, knew I always wanted to be an engineer in like early high school or engineer. I know I want to be an engineer. I want to build things. That was like where I knew I was going to end up.
Very cool. What's one technology that you can't live without?
Oh, can I say my phone? I think that's a quite important one.
You know what? Asking the question, that's the first thing that comes to my mind as well. So.
Me as well. I mean, everything revolves around that. Just in the movement throughout a day. I mean, everything's on that, from email to text to phone call and everything in between. It'd be really hard to live without. Impossible to live without that. I had an interesting conversation actually at CES a couple of years ago. I think it was just after the new iPhone had come out and they were like $1,500 or something like that. And the guy that I was having a meeting with, he was like, I would pay double for it. He's like, I do everything off my phone. He's like, it's way more impactful than my laptop. He's like, charge me more. I was like, you know what? I didn't think about it that way. That's exactly right. And that's funny. Now in the founder shoe, of course, use a laptop in my everyday, but because I'm on the move so much, I do so many more things on my phone than I had done before. Email on the fly, texting on the fly, phone calls as I'm walking through New York City with people. It's like I'm always on that. I have a battery pack on me at all points in time now, essentially, which I never had before. That's been like a new thing for me. So that's a founder learning there, is you need a portable battery pack to charge your phone.
100%. Yeah, it's so interesting. All right, last one. If you could fast forward 10 years and see one impact your work has made on the world, what would you want it to be?
Room temperature superconductors. They are a material class that will fundamentally change humanity. I mean, these are crazy inventions. Things like floating trains and lossless nuclear energy and a bunch of other applications. You know, we have an objective at Radical to do that at one point in time in 10 years in the future. To see that would be huge.
Amazing. All right. Well, look, welcome everyone to Machine Minds. I'm your host, Greg Tarusian, founder of Samson Rose, your robotics talent search partner. And on today's episode, I'm joined by Joseph, co-founder and CEO of Radical AI. Thanks for being on the show today.
Great. Thanks for having me on. Super excited to dive in.
Yeah, let's jump into it. So look, you've got this crazy impressive background. In my research for the show and previous conversations with you, you gave me a rundown. So I'd love for you to walk through your journey prior to founding Radical.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to. So going way back into the history book, I was in graduate school at Rice University, which is in Houston, Texas. I was working as a material science PhD student, working on generating and discovering new materials for electronic devices, whether that was sensors or semiconductors or some other type of application. That's what I had done a lot of research in. And I was at the same time as I went to graduate school, newly enlisted in the Army National Guard. And so right before I left for graduate school, I knew I always wanted to serve. It was a huge passion project of mine and something I wanted to be part of something greater than myself. I have a deep, 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 deep amount of respect for men and women in uniform in the country. I thought it was something I wanted to do. So my junior year of college went and enlisted in the Army National Guard. I actually enlisted on my mom's birthday accidentally. And that is like the worst thing you can do. My mother is the sweetest woman in the world and one of my biggest supporters. And I did that to her. But so I enlisted my junior year and then was in my first or second year of service in my first, second year of graduate school. So I'm doing both of these things. The National Guard is kind of part-time. You do it on the weekends and then at 2 weeks in the summer. And I get this opportunity to go to the Army Research Lab, which is this corporate research lab right outside of Washington, D.C., very fundamental in nature, still like driving your understanding of science like academia does. But you have this end goal of how do you impact the warfighter, right? The Army is paying you to try to develop solutions for the warfighter so that we can have the most advanced military in the world. And that was really cool because completely separate to that, I was a warfighter. I was in the National Guard. And so many of these problems or like ways that we were trying to relate the fundamental work that we were doing and where it was scaling up were like, synergistic with what I was thinking about on my service side. So that was super cool. It was not super cool when a general or a colonel would come through and say, what are you doing that impacts people downrange? And I'm like, sir, that's a very long explanation. I'm happy to get into, but it was kind of this amazing overlap of my passions that I had. And still there, I was very frustrated at my lack of ability to put things into market. And so I had this yearning of the things that I'm working on, the research I'm doing, I really want those things to move into and people use them, really make a fundamental impact. And it's not that science doesn't do that, Greg. It's that really it is not its main purpose. Right? Its main purpose is to drive a discovery or an understanding of an area. If that happens to commercialize and roll out, which does happen from time to time, that's great. But that's not what we're there to do per se. And so I actually got incredibly frustrated by this. So right after I passed my qualifying exam, which is the spot where you don't leave a PhD, that's the spot where like you're on your way to get your doctorate. I was like, yeah, screw this. I got to do something more aggressive. And so I cold emailed Kevin Ryan, who runs a firm out of New York called AliCorp. And I said, Kevin, if you're not investing in materials, you're not investing in the future. And Kevin, to his credit, said, that's a bold claim. I've been doing this for 35 years. I don't know if I believe you, but I'm willing to learn. And then, I had a bunch of meetings with the firm, did a whole interview process. And he said, why don't you come to New York? You spend 6 months here looking at investments, thinking about starting companies. If it goes well, amazing. You found your new career. And if it doesn't, you go back to school, finish your PhD, no harm, no foul. You had an internship and we're protected on you not being a good fit. I said, great. I'll see you on Monday. Walked upstairs. I told my now wife at the time, hey, we're moving to New York on Monday. She was like, uh-huh. I was like, no, pack everything up. We're going to New York. And she's my biggest supporter. We packed up everything and moved to New York. And that was where I joined AliCorp for about 2.5 years until I founded Radical. And I invested there in deep tech, material science, from semiconductors to 3D printing and a bunch of other things. And that led to Radical AI.
So pretty wild and very, ballsy to do that. But I'm curious, what made you jump to the thought of like VC and reaching out there instead of going straight to building?
Good question. So I had done a lot of self-study in my PhD, and I actually always I loved the idea of entrepreneurship. My father's an entrepreneur. My brother's an entrepreneur. Actually, in my PhD, my brother and I had started a coffee company. We wanted to do a direct-to-consumer coffee company. This is not important to the conversation today, but it was the early days of failed entrepreneurship. And then COVID hit as we were trying to stand this business up off the ground, and there were no roasters. There were no people like that wanted to. We just had no capital to end up executing on that. So it failed miserably. But so this idea of entrepreneurship was always here. And while I was kind of going through school, I was trying these different things. So when I wasn't doing the coffee company, I also tried commercial real estate. And I worked for free. All this is in my free time. I was doing underwriting of commercial real estate deals for a firm. I looked into private equity and VC. And I was just reading about all of these industries that I could go work into, because it kind of was having this yearning of like, science is not, I don't want to be a career scientist. I want to build things that go into the world. And one thing that was unique about Kevin and his firm was that they incubate companies in-house as well as invest at the early stage. And so when I reached out to Kevin, we had a conversation in the early days around, look, here's what we do. We're investing and you'll look at that. We also incubate and we look and go out and find CEOs and bring them in and start to incubate companies. And there's an opportunity. We've had people in the past roll out of AliCorp that were investor and have started companies and they run those companies now. And so for me, I thought there's no better way to learn how to run a company than watch companies get formed and succeed and fail. And if the right opportunity presents itself, well, then great, I can attack that and go from there. That's exactly what happened with Radical AI. At the time, no idea that was the way it was going to unfold. Looking back on it, of course, the dots always connect. And that's how I ended up in my chair today.
Love that. So what sparked the decision to found Radical AI? Like where did that clarity come from?
Yeah, so Radical AI is really a culmination of a lot of my life's work and what I do. And then my other co-founders, and one of them, a lot of his life's work and looking at computational chemistry and the ways those move into automated experimentation and the combination of those two. And then my third co-founder's background really in building companies and looking into the AI machine learning wave, which he had been investing in and paying attention to. And both Jorge Calindres, who's my co-founder on the software side, from software background, and Herd Cedar, who's that academic from Berkeley, both of them and myself share a very strong passion about our mission. And I'll talk about that later. And that's where the founding story came from. So my co-founder, Jorge, also worked at AliCorp with me. Again, he's a software guy by training. He had been on the founding engineering team of two different startups. They both exited successfully. He went and got his MBA at Dartmouth and then was investing in AliCorp for 5 years in everything software, was paying attention to AI. And he's like, I come in one day and there's a stack of research papers on his desk. You got to understand, Greg. Like software engineers aren't reading research papers usually. That's like the nerds of the scientists. So I'm like, Jorge, what are you doing? And he's like, Joseph.
What are you up to?
Yeah, I'm like, what could you be working on over there? He's like, Joseph, I am convinced of one of two different things. Either number one, all of this AI wave is bullcrap. There is no real technology here. There is just not something to make a big enough impact. Or two, the technology is very real. Everyone is just chasing low-hanging fruit on marketing and email and other products that are easy to build, but no one is going after this long-term vision. And so I said, okay, well, let me know what you find. And so I come back a week later, I come in and he's like, yeah, the technology's real. I'm convinced this is actually as incredible as everyone says it is. I just don't understand why no one's trying to cure cancer. And I said, well, I don't know about curing cancer. That is not my expertise. And I'm not even sure you can, but what about material science, right? Every industry in the world, automotive and aerospace, manufacturing, defense, climate, energy, semiconductors, electronics, the most important industries in the world, all direct result from materials R&D. Why don't we try to move into there? And so we spent the next 2 months together just reading hundreds of research papers at the intersection of machine learning and material science. And what we started to unearth was the need and requirement, I would say, for running experimentation, which is what I did at Army, high throughput experimentation, to build the data sets and confirm a lot of these theses that are happening in AI. And that's where we bumped into our third co-founder, Herd. He is an academic at Berkeley. He has a fully autonomous lab called the A Lab there. And we met with him for 30 minutes and said, wow, he's the only person we've met in the last 2 months. And we did 400 or 500 meetings in that 2 months that shared the exact perspective that we have. And so we flew out to California. We sat down. We hashed out what we thought the vision is going to look like over an extended period of time. And us three said, yeah, let's do this. And we went from there.
That is a great founding story. Okay, cool. So for the listeners that aren't familiar, and if you have like a elevator pitch about what Radical AI does, like how would you describe the company and the problem that you guys are solving?
Yeah, what Radical is aiming to accomplish today is to build the future material science company. And the way that we do that is by building that company around AI and autonomy and putting those two at the center. And we can talk about the way that we do that. When you look into materials today, as I just said, even though they impact the most important industries in the world, there are two core problems: time, 10 plus years to development, and cost, usually like north of 100 million to go from computational discovery to really scaling and manufacturing a new system. And so when you look at both of those, the fragmentation of material science and the lack of innovation inside the scientific process itself have led to stagnated and very kind of archaic processes inside discovering and scaling new materials. Our AI and autonomy-based approach, which we call materials flywheel, does exactly that. Brings down that timeline, brings down that cost to novel discovery so that we can make new materials that go into some of the most important industries in the world. That is what radical AI is all about.
Super exciting. Very science fiction. For the people that aren't in the space and they're listening to this, they're like, wow, that is crazy.
I mean, it really is starting to, we comp a lot of the stuff that we've built, or like him, use as an example, Jarvis from Iron Man. Have you ever seen that? When he makes the new material that goes in the heart, right? We are getting close to a level, not exactly there yet, but where we have an entire operating system that will show us our experimental results. We can talk to, we can actually ask it to solve problems for us, recommend new compositions, think about simulating properties. We can do all those things today. It's just a matter of incorporating them into this entire flywheel, which is what we're building. But it is a sci-fi future for sure that we are going to really turn into sci-fact.
That's awesome. Can you explain your closed loop self-driving lab approach?
Absolutely.
Yeah, why that's such a leap?
For sure. So getting into that a little bit more deeply, you just heard me talk about it. So two areas of what we call materials flywheel. On one end, you have this generation engine, AI driven, and it's really focused on recommending novel materials, right? How can I predict the new materials of the world that we need today? And it does this with a mixture of experts-based approach. We use graph neural nets, we use diffusion models, we use language models, solving a wide range of problems that all lead up into what we call inverse design. And inverse design in material science space is, rather than making a new material and seeing who can use that new material, in inverse design, we actually go to the end customers. We learn about their material problems and the properties they need, and then we inversely design the material from that. This is so-called the holy grail of materials discovery. So this left side of the flywheel is entirely focused on generating new materials and in this inversely designed fashion. And once we generate them, what we do is send them to the other side of the flywheel, which is our fully robotic self-driving lab. And this lab is important for two reasons. One, to test materials. You don't have a new material until you test them. And I'm going to come back to this point as a big differentiation. And then number two, the data. In material science today, particularly when you're building that left side of AI engine, we don't have a lot of data like other industries have. We have very limited experimental data at that. And in material science, 90% of the work that we do as scientists are mistakes. They're negative results. They're things that don't lead to discovery. It's actually all of that experience that leads to the 10% of things that end up working. And we don't capture any of that data. And so in self-driving labs, we can pull all of that: temperature, pressure, oxidation, concentration, even something like the humidity in the room, if that impacts something. And we can take all of that and feed it back into our AI engine. And hence this flywheel forms, where you are recommending and generating new materials. They get sent over to a lab, which is testing them at a very high throughput pace. And then it's taking all that information and analysis and sending those results back into this AI engine to incorporate that and recommend new materials based on the results that you just saw. So that is what we are kind of focused on and doing today. And that is what the flywheel consists of.
So traditionally, all of those factors aren't tracked. All of that data isn't tracked in failed experiments.
No. And mostly because of kind of like the way we do it as experimental scientists. You get to think, when I was at the Army Research Lab, I ran 50 experiments a year, probably. And I would go in a very serial-based process, right? I would go from reading publications and making hypotheses to then making those materials and then analyzing those materials, thinking about all of that, and then going back to the start of the loop. Well, the first part of that is the serial nature. It's incredibly slow. I actually can't correlate experiments I make on test 1 to experiments I do on test 10. It's very hard for the human brain to do that. And so I kind of let those things go. And then secondly, I'm really not prioritizing the negative results. It's part of my day-to-day job, right? If I see a structure that is, failing under stress, I'm like, okay, I got to rethink that. I got to add stronger elements into the combination. Let me go back and reset. I'm not recording that anywhere. I'm not writing down the stress strain curve. I'm not looking at the composition and making sure I, mark all the different parameters that we put into that test. I'm just knowing myself that it didn't work. And so there really is no capture mechanism on these experimental results. The only ones that we really have are the successes. And that's what shows up in publications or things like that today. So that's really a missing loop inside this process. And this is why this combination between AI and self-driving labs is imperative to what we're trying to do for new discovery.
Crazy. So where is the scientist when this is happening? Like, how are they controlling these labs?
Yes. So this is not fully available today. So just to be super clear, we are working towards this. Our scientists are still integrated in the lab. They're still running some experiments or weighing in on some experiments. Hey, here's the results there, or this is my analysis on this different picture or graph. But where we want to get to and what we're developing right now is this, lab in a box where a scientist can be sitting on a beach or in the mountains, pull up his or her iPad, open up our operating system, which runs this entire lab. It's called Antimatter. And in Antimatter, look at the 100 experiments that are currently running, the stages of all those experiments, what materials are being run, what are the combinations, what are the ones that are already have ran, and what are all the results from those, as well as the analysis of those results. And then they can actually, in real time, ask and tell the agent what to run next based on what it's seeing. And so I can be sitting on the beach in Bermuda. I can be looking at my box, my lab box, and I can be like, do this, do that, change this. That
Logging in for work.
right. And this is the future that we truly see, not to make scientists go work on the beach. No, of course not. It's that you actually start to scale what a scientist can do, right? In the current scientific process, you have 10 scientists focused on one problem at a time. That's what it takes to orchestrate the process I just ran you through. And what I just described, now you have one scientist focused on 10 problems at a time, right? I have an iPad with 10 different labs running, and I'm watching experiments and using the results of those experiments across all of the research areas that I'm focused on. You are really exponentially increasing the output of discovery that we can do. And that discovery is not only faster, but much more intelligent as well, because you are capturing that intuition and really building scientific intelligence.
Yeah, the power of AI. These are the like real problems to be solving, because we see it. I mean, you open YouTube, if you've ever searched anything AI, people are like, hey, I have this company of 5 people, but they're all agents. Now I can sell you more crap, or like produce more content, or all this irrelevant stuff that AI is being used for by someone in their bedroom. But yeah, well, when we first spoke, and just a tidbit for everyone out there, I was at the Upfront Summit, and Josh Wolf was on stage, founder of Lux Capital, and he had talked about this. So when we first spoke and you started explaining it, I was like, whoa, these dots connect, because he's crazy smart, very unique perspective on the world. And he was like, this is where I'm most excited about for the future. So when I learned about you and what you guys are doing, I was like, oh, it's happening. It's happening right now. And this is exactly that.
That's exactly where we think we are. We completely agree, Greg. And what we like to tell people is you have to understand, I mean, this is a monumental change in the way we do scientific discovery. And that's exciting. And we think with where we are today, to use an analogy, it's like OpenAI in 2018 or 2019, right? If you were in machine learning, if you were deep in that field, you were aware things were going on inside the space. But for most people, they didn't know it was a reality yet, right? They had heard some things maybe in passing in the early ChatGPT days. They might have used it. And I remember the hallucinations arguments were, but it really hallucinates everything. And now it's a part of everyone's life. We think we're on that trajectory right now for self-driving labs and AI and science. It's only a matter of a couple of years before this becomes the industry norm. And I think in 10 years' time, there will be no one who does science without self-driving lab technology, maybe 10 to 15 years.
Amazing. Where do you see the biggest breakthroughs coming first? Like aerospace, energy, biotech?
All of them. Biotech will be big. There's already a bunch of companies in drug discovery generally that are working here. Aerospace, defense, energy have a serious need for novel materials, meaning what we call enabling technologies. And this is what we focus on as a company today. In materials, we kind of describe problems in 2 different buckets. One is enabling, which is we don't have the materials that we need to do the thing you're asking us to do today, right? A great example of this is like a nuclear fusion reactor. There are components in that reactor called a diverter. They're made with tungsten-based materials today, and they are seriously prone to radiation effects or neutron effects from running the plasma. And so they degrade aggressively over time. We must have a novel material that blocks against that. And there's a lot of research going into trying to solve that problem today. That's enabling technology. On the other side, there's optimization. And this is what I was referring to a little bit in that beginning, where the material space, especially the large material companies, are very much focused on, 1, 2, 3% gains on their current products. And that can drive value from a capital perspective and, their earnings report to Wall Street. That is not going to make us land on Mars. That is not going to enable room temperature superconductors so that we have floating bullet trains, right? That is not going to enable interplanetary travel. Those are new materials that are going to enable those things. And so I think the biggest breakthroughs will come in industries like aerospace, like defense, like energy, like bio, where novel discovery is at the core of enabling the next advancement.
I didn't want to get into space stuff because I can go down like a very deep alien rabbit hole and all of that stuff. But first I was thinking about like, the SR-71 Blackbird, how they made it, because at those speeds, the airframe has to expand. And when it's on the ground, it's just leaking fluid, right? You guys could find something that would mitigate the leaking of the fluid.
That's exactly correct.
Right.
Or be more expansive and have better mechanical performance, right? There's a bunch of ways that we think about it. If you look at hypersonic flight today, this is an area that we're focused on. Hypersonic flight is what we call operating in extreme environments, high temperature ranges, thousands of degrees, very high pressures, serious oxidation elements of the atmosphere that you're dealing with when you're flying at Mach 5 and above. You need new materials to be able to, withstand those conditions. And based on your parameters, 30-minute flight, 60-minute flight, 15-hour flight, and where you're flying and what you're flying, all of those things bring different constraints, right? Of course, if it's a passenger aircraft, that's entirely different than a hypersonic missile. That, right, is a different use case. And so the customization requirements that are needed for advanced materials to make those things become a reality is immense. And I think, to your point, those are the industries that we'll see take most adoption quickly.
Yeah. What about semiconductors?
Huge. I think will be a big industry. I did a lot of work in my PhD on semiconductors. The challenge with semiconductors is that the process is so complex, it's very hard to change. If you take silicon today, right, our photolithography processes, EUV and deep EUV, are entirely built around the silicon transistor and the silicon wafer. So to move off that material system and move to something else, you're not only upending the chips that we use today. That's TSMC and ASML and all the other players that go into making a semiconductor chip. That is a deeper problem than, say, just the materials aspect of what's going on in the nose cone of a rocket. At the same time, the semiconductor industry is pressed for innovation. We are at the lowest of node sizes with the 2 nanometers, of course, or 3 nanometer today. And so where they're going to go next, I think, will be a material science problem. And a lot of my PhD was looking at working with what are called 2D materials to try to get around silicon or replace silicon in the future. So I think semis will get there. They might just be a little bit resistant, not because of lack of innovation, but because of the supply chains and resources that are in place today.
Random one. Would your labs or like the material science kind of like discovery element help with like propulsion or like fluids or things like that as well to find new forms of or new gasoline type things?
So it depends on what you are trying to solve for. We get asked a lot about sustainable aviation fuel, for example, which is trying to drive a better efficiency, for lack of a better phrase on that. There might be some materials inside that. Can you use better catalysts? Can you think about different reaction mechanisms, et cetera? Because you're really changing the fuel. With current fuels today, you actually probably want to work on the things around it. So I'll give you a perfect example. If you are limited to the current fuel sources for Starship today that SpaceX has, right, weight's a concern. Because once you're out of fuel, you're out of fuel. And so if your weight's a concern, then you really need reusable rockets And you have to be able to do things when you get to your destination. Both of those things are material science problem, right? If you want reusable rockets, then you need TPS. That's actually not a one-shot application. That doesn't ablate away. You need a novel alloy or high temperature ceramic, ultra high temperature ceramic to replace that system. And then once you get to the surface of Mars, well, you're not going to carry solar panels with you, Greg, unless you got some insane invention over there. You're going to build them when you get there. And so who's going to do the science on Mars to start making photovoltaics with Martian soil and Martian elements, not Earth elements? And these are the problems that, if you're really trying to think about where you're going, I think I wouldn't focus on the fuel. I'd focus on the applications that are going to come from that and the constraints that it automatically brings. If you could power those things with nuclear fuel, you probably wouldn't have a weight problem and or a reusability problem, because those rockets would probably be seriously reusable and be able to bring anything they want with them to the place that they're going. So it really depends on how you want to solve the problem.
Interesting. And we touched a bit on this, but was it like an aha moment for you guys that pushed you from concept to actual building a company?
Yes. We did 10 conversations in a row where everyone said this is impossible. And we said, okay, now we're really
We'll show you.
now we're really doing it. I think it was a gradual but immediately understood aha moment. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Right away, we knew the idea was great. We actually think ideas are worthless, right? Anyone can have the idea. I think it was quite obvious that this idea should exist. And then the gradual part of that was, as we continued to dive into the space and talk to people and see where technology was, we became more and more convinced that our initial gut feel of, oh my gosh, we have to do this, was just confirmed time and time again. And so we had this immediate, oh, this is the application that we should go build. And then we went out and kept vetting that and to a point that, we got to a point where we said, yeah, if we don't build this, no one's going to. And we are the perfect people to build it. And so then that switch came quite aggressively from there. So it was a gradual kind of crescendo to that acceptance that it was going to happen. But very early on, really from concept day one, we were like, this is a good idea. Someone's going to build this company.
Awesome. So you talked about how you were at AliCorp, you met your co-founder there, you guys flew out to Berkeley. That was the three of you coming together. How did the rest of the early team come together?
A ungodly amount of cold emails and meetings and lunches and things to get people to sign up. We'll probably talk about this if you want a little bit later. We are really insane about our culture at Radical AI. We are trying to solve some of the hardest problems in the world. We fail daily. It is excruciatingly challenging to work at Radical AI because what we're trying to do has fundamental impact for the entire human race. And the reason I bring that up now is when we went out to build the early team, we were very cognizant of that. And so we went and found people who had been publishing on the space, had written about the space publicly, who were recommended to us from people we talked to from those publications who said, hey, this person thinks a lot about AI and materials and where they cross over. And we did 890 meetings in the first 8 months of the company or so, something like that, or 8 or 9 months, to really find the first 20 people that we wanted to bring on board. And that was kind of how we went out and got the early team. And the culture was how we found them. They're incredibly talented. They're the smartest people I've ever met in my life. They're here because of the mission, right? We tell every single person that we hire in the company, if you're looking for a job, this is not the place for you. You should go work somewhere else where you can find a great job. If you want to work on a mission, then Radical is the place that you should come. And those first 20 that we brought on, it was imperative that they believe that exact same thing. And so that's how we really went about finding them. And we took that process very seriously. You only have one chance to build the fabric and the culture of the company, and it has to be done correctly.
I love that. Obviously, hiring is very close to my heart. It's what I focus on all the time, and culture is a huge part of that. So let's talk about it because we're on the topic anyway. But I love that you're almost trying to make people say no.
100%.
You want people to, you want them to be scared. You don't want to sugarcoat. And it's a great filtering mechanism, especially for that core team.
Absolutely. I mean, we go to the length, of actually really explaining how difficult it is, the challenges we're going to have to overcome, the challenges we're currently going through to try to build what we're building. And to your point, it's funny. A lot of people will say, yeah, no, that's not for me. And you're like, great. Not that it's not for you, but that we've both figured that out. You can go do what you want to do, and we can go find someone who wants to be here and needs to be here. But number two is the people that do want to be here. Instantaneously, sign me up. Where do I sign up? That's all I want to do is work on things like that. And there's just a very different perspective on trying to solve problems this way. And I think, one of our core principles is first principle analysis. We ask the question why to everything, like really to an excruciating level. Like sometimes we'll be like, I'm having a meeting on Monday. Why? I mean, we will really ask why about everything. We think that's how you get at the root of problems and then therefore the root of solutions. But so much of that mentality and being willing to we're very direct, we're very honest at the company. We ask a lot of first principle analysis, we're relentless, comes from that first screen that you and I just talked about, where you get that, heck yes, this is what I want to subscribe to, or you get this, hell no, that's not, I have no interest in doing that. That's not where I am in my career today. It's a very important filter mechanism.
So important. I think also it's hard to not be passionate or interested about what you guys are doing, right? But there's also people's situations in life, personal life, careers, that if they are, and this is just like a talent funnel perspective that I always look at, like if they are passionate, if they are interested, if they really want to be there, but they're like, you know what, I just had a kid or I'm about to move or whatever, but I'm going to support you guys. Like I'm going to feed you referrals. I'm going to send you papers. I'm going to give you like anything I can on the side to keep in touch. And then in the future, like when the time's right, I want to jump in. It's also a great thing. You're just so overly transparent and setting the stage that, if you are here, this is all consuming because the mission is so impactful.
100%. This happens to us all the time. So we are entirely an in-person company. We do not believe in remote work. And so we frequently are having conversations with people from all over the world around, do you want to move to New York? And you have to move to New York for this role. And we hear what you just alluded to, right? I just had a first kid. Oh, I just had my first kid. I know exactly what that feels like and what they're going through, right? So of course that's a valid thing to bring up. I don't know about New York. I just moved my family here. I don't know if you're going to, if I want to bet my career on moving there for the company is and how young you are. But we've also moved 15 people here. And so there is this level of, if you understand the impact Radical AI is going to have, just like I moved to New York, just like other people have moved places all over the world, that people will move here, and they have moved here for the company. And as you said, we have quite a few people who were prevented from moving here for a family reason, a medical reason, or another constraint that was out of their control. And we talk to them frequently. They're watching the company grow. They're seeing us put things out. And, we probably have a Rolodex of 100 to 150 people that we know would want to come here, if not for another constraint, that when the right time comes, or when, we start to hit a clip that they just can't take it anymore. They just can't watch from the sidelines anymore. We have a great talent pipeline to index there as well. And so it's really important as the founding team to build that out.
So important. Yeah. Yeah. Because the opposite could also be true. You sugarcoat it. You say, no, it could be flexible. We'll bring you in. No, it's not all because, culture's important. We want you to be happy. You bring them in, you burn that bridge, they leave, and they're not going to support you. They're not going to come back. I call it polluting the candidate pool. Right now, they're going to go out and they're just going to talk shit about you to other people and people in their network. And then,
and it's unfair. It's unfair, right? Like when we signed up, when we said we're going to do this, we looked at each other and said, are we ready for this? All right, like this is going to take 25 years of unbelievable effort and strain and performance every day. Do we want to do this? And we netted that all. Not only do we want to do it, we have to do it for the future of humanity. And because we accepted that early on, it's not hard. We actually love what we do. It's incredibly hard to build a company. We don't sit around and say, wow, it's so hard. We sit around and go, what challenge today? What's next? How do we get closer to our North Star of removing materials as the biggest bottleneck to our most important industries? And so the more upfront you can be with people, the more success they're going to have, right? Because they show up on day one ready to jump into the fire, and into the fire they go. On their first day, they have to finish, measure what matters, set their OKRs, and ship something by the end of day one. Every single
Wow.
person that works with them. And so they're in fire on day one. And so if they're coming in, I think it's going to be nice and cushy and slow moving and everything's going to work. They're going to be super upset with you, rightly so, because you weren't honest. But then they're probably not going to be a good fit either, because they might not have selected into that in the first place. And now you as a founding team and as a company, now you're in a really tough spot because you have someone who doesn't want to be there, who might not be the right fit. And you just kind of set the direction around that, and or kind of stopped hiring for there or brought in someone that you now have to replace. That just slows you down and sets you back. And so, of course, you'll make those mistakes. You'll never be perfect. But when you can limit them from own error of not being honest or not telling you like it is, then you just can move that much quicker.
It's probably, I don't think this is intentional, but what you're also doing there's a metric in the recruiting world, especially in the internal recruiting world, that isn't talked about a lot, but it's super important, which is time to productivity. And when you hire people, if you have like an opportunistic hire, or you're like, oh, our investor introduced this person, let's find a place for them, we'll bring them in, and they don't feel part of the company or having an impact, or they're not productive within 30 days, there's much higher risk, much higher percentage of them leaving, being disengaged, and taking other opportunities. So if on day one, they're already shipping stuff, they're setting OKRs, they're part of the company, they're feeling productive, that onboarding is just completely expedited, that time to productivity, that engagement, and they're in, they're locked. I mean, they're locked in from interview one, it sounds like, with you, but you can't do all of that and then drop the ball when they actually move to New York. So
you're exactly correct. We actually think about this. You have to think about it this way. What we are trying to do in 25 years would take normal people and the way we've been doing materials today 100 years, which means what we're trying to do in a 25-year time frame, we're trying to do in 5 years, right? So if they don't have something to do in the first 30 minutes or an hour of them walking into the building, we need to have a conversation with them, because something is not right. But in all seriousness, there are so many things going on. There's so much momentum to build and things to execute against that we just have to move. And I think it also highlights, you made me think about great people. You know, there's a funny thing at the company. I get kind of made fun of by the team because a couple months ago, I got sent an email. I was very angry about banning the word strategy at the company. Right? I was like, we're not, you are forbidden from saying the word strategy, bias to action only. I want a bias to action based culture. And we do believe that. It's a very serious idea. And so the best people, even if they get hired as an opportunistic hire, or they come in from somewhere that they hadn't done this before, they are immediately doing something, because we probably vetted for them on bias to action as equally as technical ability and leadership ability and buy into the mission and things like this as well. And so if you have that as a a trait or a persona, you're going to come in and you're going to try and make yourself valuable instantaneously. And I think that I love the 30-day metric. If you can't do it, I think it's actually like a week, to be honest, but I'll give them 30 days as a grace period. If you can't do it then, you're just probably not in the right role. It doesn't mean you're dumb. Doesn't mean you're not talented. It doesn't mean you can't execute on things. It might just be the wrong opportunity or the wrong company and culture for you. And you got to find some place that you can excel in.
Do you have any advice for young scientists or engineers who want to work at the intersection of AI and material science?
Pay attention to where the future is going. Autonomous experimentation will be a thing. It's already here. All of the big tool companies down to the companies like Radical AI are building these technologies today. I'd worry less about running the tools and more about how to control that iPad operation of those tools. I think two, you're going to see intuition become extremely important. A lot of a scientist's job today is executing on the research and then analyzing that research. It's both pieces, right? It's that process I talked about. when we move to robotics, automation, and AI executing the research, really all the scientist is left to do is analyze, and we won't jump ahead of the script there, but even there, AI will provide impact. But so really becoming strong at understanding the problems you're trying to solve and the inputs, or I guess intuition, again, that you can bring to a problem, super important. I think I would spend time on those two things. Becoming an expert at a single tool or in a single area, I think will prove less fruitful in the future, because those things will be done with automated labs and with AI engines generating a lot of new structures for you. It'll come to implement that into real application.
Very cool. So you guys recently raised a massive seed round, 55 million, led by RTX Ventures. You guys are backing from NVIDIA as well. What doors does that open for you as a company?
So 3 most important things you have to think about when you do a round like this. Number 1 is people, right? You need the best people in the world to build one of the most important companies in the world. And we are scaling the team quite aggressively, and it's an important metric. Number 2 for us is that experimental data. I mentioned that closing the flywheel, if you can run a lot of high throughput experimentation, there's an incredibly rich data set in doing so, and then train the models on that provides a huge amount of technical value as well as moat. We want to build one of the largest material science labs in the world, multiple different lab lines, working on a bunch of different problems, and really building this platform like self-driving lab approach, but not that we sell, that we use internally to solve different problems. That's objective number 2. And then objective number 3 is really supporting resources for that. So compute. We work with a compute partner, Voltage Park, on providing the compute we need to run quantum chemistry calculations, as well as the machine learning side, real estate, and actual, the HQ that we build where we can put this materials lab. And then also thinking around, our strategy around government and PR and how we need to make sure everyone is aware that science is changing and radical AI is leading the charge. That is important, in our opinion, at this perspective. And so this capital gives you the ability to do that. But talent and, the state-of-the-art self-driving lab are where, our deep focus is today.
You all heard they are scaling, they're growing. Go and look for the roles. Look at the careers page if you're interested.
Correct. Absolutely. Give us a holler. I answer every cold email if I can that I receive. That's how I got my start. So if you are interested in AI and science, if you are interested in working on a ridiculously hard mission and you want to be part of a culture that moves ridiculously fast and wants to build one of the most important companies to ever exist, please reach out. We'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. I'm going to put your contact info and everything in the show notes. You mentioned government. I know that you guys have also collaborated with the White House, OSTP, on the 2025 National AI and R&D Strategy. How did that come about, and what did you guys contribute?
Cold email.
Really?
It's my chief of staff at the time, Beth Winterholler, her and I were kicking around, okay, the government's going to put out an AI policy, and AI for science must be in that policy. We have to do whatever it takes to do that. And so Beth is incredibly analytical and talented on the research side. And she bumped into a gentleman named Dean Ball, who had, when she reached out, not worked in government at the current time. And then as we were scheduling a call, it was a cold email that we reached out to, had got selected by Kratios to join the OSTP office in the White House. And so we went down to DC, we met with Dean and a few members of the team there. And we really kind of told them, forget radical AI. Science is one of the most important areas that we must have technological dominance. And if you don't pay attention to what AI and autonomy are going to do for scientific discovery, you will be left in the past, not just in science, but in the resulting industries that come from the new science new countries make. And so this is imperative to the country that we focus on this. And very much to OSTP's credit, they had already done a deep dive in materials, in bio, and a couple other fields. They were aware of the areas that AI for science were going to make a big impact. But so we did this RFI. You can check that out on our website or on our social media pages. And we really talked about how important it is to build a couple of different components of the infrastructure layer, et cetera, for the government to have. And they were responsive to that. And when you look in the AI policy today, in the second paragraph of that AI policy introduction, they call out material science. And we are like to believe that we played a part in making sure that was talked about early, given the impact it will have on tens of industries in the future.
It's huge. That's huge. I'm curious. We didn't actually speak about this, and this is just, I guess, more for my curiosity. How does simulation play a part in experimentation or when you find the new materials? Is that something that you...
Yes. So I guess we think about simulation in really two different big buckets. First is on material simulation. There's quantum chemistry, things like density functional theory and molecular dynamics. And then the second area is simulating the lab. And that's both from like a robotics perspective of building digital twin environments where you can watch operation and control throughput, optimize that process, but also, simulate experiments, simulate what the results are going to be and be able to predict and characterize and then confirm or, see the differences between results that we see in real experimentation. And so we are building out both of those lenses today. On the computational side, this field is much more developed. It's where machine learning is starting to come into it. So there's a lot of talk around machine learned intertime potentials, or what are called MLIPs. And they're really moving into this quantum chemistry, computational chemistry world of we're trying to predict the energy forces and stressors that you typically get out of a DFT calculation. And they can speed up calculations, et cetera. We actually have a package out called TorchSim. This is available open source. You can find information on our website or on social media about this to actually speed up a lot of those calculations on the simulation front in the quantum chemistry realm. So we do a lot of work there. We think it's going to be a really big piece. Also looking forward, we also think there's a lot of areas where AI will eat some of the simulation work as well, where it will inherently know or kind of work around what you are trying to simulate. And that's our opinion in that is more specific to materials today. But if you think about materials, if you look at this shirt here, you don't really care what the electronic structure is of the shirt, right? Is it soft? Can I wash it? Does it not fall apart? Is it a nice color? Can I, all those things? And then what is it made of? Like what's the composition or structure that comes from that? That's the things that we care about from an application perspective. Now, it's not to say we don't need to understand the underlying physics of the system. We do, but there is a thought and a line of thinking in the AI community where these generative models kind of skip over that intuition and that thought and just get you the end answer. The same way a computer vision model or a language model on ChatGPT will predict what you would say next in an email, even though you've never written that email before. It knows how you write emails, what the English language is, how it can write in email and execute across that. Very similar to that exact dynamic today. So we'll see how those things unfold.
Nice. What are the biggest hurdles in fully automating scientific discovery?
Material tools. The tools that we buy are old, right? We buy a bunch of tools in our lab. They're from very big vendors who sell them to everyone in materials around the world. And they are slow to adopt automation. Some of them are better than others. Some of them have, interfaces or SDKs or APIs even that we can work with and use their tools. Some have nothing. And our software team has to build a stack to be able to use them in our operating system. And it takes a lot of time and effort with working with them. How can you control the tool? Some of those tools, it's not a software problem. There is no even ability to do the actuation with software in the tool. So tooling is our biggest area. We have to embody and or partner with a lot of different companies so that we can allow those tools to work in our automated system. So that's definitely the hardest part of the self-driving lab.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. You're moving at such a fast speed and ahead of the curve, and then everyone else is kind of trying to catch up.
Right. Exactly right.
Where do you think we'll see radical AI's impact first in the real world?
I was thinking about this. There are so many potential answers. I can give you the three things that are competing. I think it might be in aerospace/defense. We are working on systems there directly. We have grants from the Air Force on those systems directly for end applications inside those industries. I think semiconductors is another one. We have a lot of early interest in. Semiconductors is a longer value chain, as we've already talked about today, and has a different problem than enabling. So a lot of semiconductors is optimization or kind of maybe a big stepwise improvement, but in a similar material system. It's not an entirely new material system. And then third would be energy. We have a lot of interest in energy, whether that's nuclear fusion, through to batteries, through to things like catalysts, which are a huge area in materials. And I'd say a lot of companies working on catalysts. I think you'll see energy as a field be a big winner from AI and materials, not just from Radical AI, from a bunch of companies working across the space. Yeah, exactly.
If you look ahead a decade, what excites you most about the future of AI-driven science and engineering?
It is tough to envision the world that we will be able to build because of the new materials that we have. I think we don't know how we're going to build a habitat on Mars today, but we will 10 years from now. And I think we hope and aim to have Radical AI's logo stamped into every piece of whatever material is making up that habitat on Mars and the rocket that's taking people there. And so I think the unlocks we will have from the novel discoveries we make will be hard to predict.
Awesome. Look, I respect your time. I know we are almost at the end. Do you have time for a quick two-question fun wrap-up? All right, cool.
Absolutely.
If you could design any material with zero limitations, what would it be and why?
R-tap superconductor. Guaranteed. Yeah. That is one of the holy grails of material science. And if I don't want to say that one, a high entropy alloy is a backup.
Okay. Those are there. They were at the front of your mind.
We might be working on them internally as well.
Yeah. Okay, cool. You heard it here first. What's one book or movie that shaped how you think about science and innovation? Or an idea? Yeah.
I love sci-fi movies. And one of my favorite movies of all time is Interstellar. And I don't know if I would go as far as say like it shaped me as a scientist, right? But this idea that you can build complex systems. And my favorite part of that movie is how smart we are, like how sophisticated the space program is in the actual execution of what they end up doing. From an inspiration perspective, that's a great movie for me. I love that movie. On the book side, I love reading, and there's so many books that apply lessons to solving hard problems. But one of the ones that I love the most, and this is more about company building versus, I think, just science, but although it applies to a lot of the failures, is Can't Hurt Me, David Goggins. Now, I'm a massive David Goggins fan, so I must admit that up front. But it's just this mentality of like, there's nothing you can say or do to me that is going to discourage me from doing what I'm doing. And so I could do 1,000 calls from today on about people saying Radical AI will never work. And I will only push harder to make it become a reality. And I think when you accept that that's the way the world works, and if you don't believe it, no one else will. That's just it's like this level you reach where everything else opens out in front of you. And I think I relate that back to science or radical at large in that, as I mentioned in the show already, we are going to hit a lot of roadblocks. There will be a lot of failures. And if those things upset you or get you down or make you doubt or make you quit, then radical is not going to succeed. You're not going to succeed in what you're trying to do. And science is all about that. Science is doing the famous quote of the light bulbs, right? All of the experiments that didn't work for the one that did. You just have to have a ridiculous amount of determination and dedication to your mission. And that book really showed me that it's all up here.
It's awesome. Look, thank you so much for being on the show, sharing all your insights, everything about Radical AI. This has been a huge learning experience for me, but I'm sure our listeners are going to get a ton from it.
Good.
So thank you again. How can our listeners learn more about you, Radical AI, follow along with everything you guys are doing?
Absolutely. You can check out our website, radical-ai.com. See a lot of stuff for our news are posted there, as well as what we're working on. Also, social media on X, on LinkedIn. We post most of our updates there, as well as our website. So feel free to reach out. feel free to send any of us an email, and I am pretty sure you will hear back from one of us, whether it's something we can do together or not. So please feel free to reach out.
That's great. Thank you, Joseph. Really appreciate it. And let's keep in touch.
Greg, thanks for the time.